from Lagos, the nation's commercial capital. This is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Amarachi Ubani.
Tonight, President Buhari urges Nigerians to reflect on the virtues of the Holy Prophet by showing love and understanding for fellow citizens as Muslims worldwide celebrate Eid-el-Maulud. As more states take stock of destruction to government and private properties following the NSAS protests, Kogi state government laments vandalization and looting of equipment at the Central Medical Store in Lokoja. Adamawa state government recovers over 60 of the 110 tractors looted from its storage facilities. Vows to ensure all are returned by the looters. And President Emmanuel Macron says France will not surrender its core values after 3 persons were killed in a knife attack at a church in Nice. Plus business, sports and more later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, federal government seeks to engage stakeholders in final push for Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala to lead the World Trade Organization despite opposition from the United States.
On sports news tonight, Victor Osimhen and Ogene Karu-Etebo return as Super Eagles head coach Yonar Roar calls 23 players for next month's AFCON qualifying doubleheader against Sierra Leone.
Muslims worldwide are celebrating Eid-el-Maulud, which signifies the birth of the Prophet Muhammad over 1,400 years ago in Mecca. Here in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari is urging the citizens to reflect on the virtues of the Holy Prophet by showing love and understanding for fellow citizens. In the president's message to commemorate the birthday of Prophet Muhammad, he's also asking youths in particular to shun all negative tendencies as manifested in the recent hijacking of peaceful protests to loot and destroy public and private property. Speaking on the COVID-19 pandemic, President Buhari cautions Nigerians not to stretch their luck too far, even though the country has so far managed the problem successfully. In his words, looking at the trends in the other countries, we must do all we can to avert the second wave of the pandemic. We must make sure that our cases, which have gone down, do not rise again. Our economy is too fragile to bear another round of lockdown. President Buhari is also asking all citizens to continue to observe the COVID-19 protocols of social distancing, wearing of face masks, and the washing of hands. It may yet be early to fully determine the actual implications of destruction that followed the NSAS protests, but the Kogi state government is counting its losses, which it says already run into billions of naira, after the state's central medical store was looted and equipment vandalized. The State Commissioner for Health, Dr. Saka Audu, who toured the facilities with other health and government officials, broke down in tears over the damage done to the state's health sector. He says the state is still quantifying the extent of the destruction and will soon make the list of stolen items and their cost implications public.
Health officials in Kogi State on a tour of a central medical store complex, or what's left of it. Built under the essential drugs program of the state government, it's from here that drugs and hospital equipment are distributed to health centers and general hospitals across the 21 local government areas. Sadly, the facility is not spared in the looting and vandalism carried out in the aftermath of the NSAS protests. Test kits, drugs, and other pharmaceutical consumables are missing, while machines for magnetic resonance imaging, computer tomography, digital mammography, digital radiography, refrigerators for vaccines, solar power units, laboratory equipment are vandalized. The damage is beyond anything the state government had imagined, the losses running into billions of naira. It's too much to bear for the Commissioner for Health, Dr. Saka Audu, who breaks down in tears while briefing the media on the situation after the inspection.
It is indeed a very unfortunate development that the state will find very difficult to recover from, as we don't have the capacity to provide what have been carted away or vandalized in a short time.
Indeed, it's an emotional briefing for the state health authorities. Even the executive director of the State Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Abubakar Yakubu, is equally moved to tears as he tries to explain how everything was lost in just 2 hours.
This is the right time for us to come together, to stay together, and to defeat this menace of our society.
The Kogi state government says it will take a miracle for its health sector to recover from the losses. A miracle, it prays, will manifest soon.
In Adamawa State, the looting by Rampagin residents has been described by Governor Umaru Fintere as a war against the People's Commonwealth. The governor made the comparison during the tour to assess the damage to government and private facilities in Yola, the state capital. It follows the expiration of a deadline given to the looters to return stolen items or face the wrath of the law. Meanwhile, over 60 of the 110 tractors carted away by residents are said to have been recovered.
Following the period of wanton looting in Adamawa State, the governor, Umaru Fintiri, is on this tour to get a feel of the extent of damage to public and private facilities. Carnage is what greets him at every site, whether at the Upper Benue River Basin Development Agency warehouse, the Adamawa State Emergency Management Agency warehouse, or the Coalition Against COVID-19 store. The premises of the Northeast Commodity Association, where tractors meant for the Anchor Borrowers program were housed, was not spared.
Every item you have seen, either fertilizer, herbicide, chemical, including the tractors, all are loans taken to support agricultural production.
A suspected looter denies involvement.
I did not loot the tractor. I was only approached by some people to assist them move it to my vehicle, which I did, and only later realized what happened. So I informed the police. But despite that, I was still arrested.
In the State Primary Healthcare Development Center, cartons of documents are all that's left behind. The headquarters of Customs Service was also broken into. But in all this, there is some good news.
Over 60 tractors have been recovered and returned. They're in the custody of the security agency. And we will continue to monitor till evening to see if they are still complying with the order. Even though reports reaching me, they are complying substantially. And we will, from here, go back, evaluate the situation, and take the best decision in the interest of the state.
Also, hundreds of people have been arrested in connection with the destruction and for violating the state-imposed curfew. At this point, the total loss to the state can only be imagined. The governor is, however, hopeful that more looted goods will be returned.
Governors of states in the southeast and other leaders in the area are warning the destruction of public and private property, killing of security operatives and citizens will no longer be tolerated in the region. This formed part of resolutions after a meeting of the state's chief executives, National Assembly members from the zone and a delegation of the Igbo Socio-Cultural Organization, Ohaneze and Igbo, at the Government House in Enugu. The chairman of the Southeast Governors Forum and Ebonyi State Governor Dave Umahi said the leaders also agreed to set up funds to assist victims of the recent violence that followed the End SARS protests.
One is that we sympathize with all the victims' families, including the police and other security agencies, as well as all those who lost their loved ones and properties in the recent disturbances that followed the End SARS agitations. Two, the Southeast leaders, we engage our youth to ensure a sustainable peace in the Southeast and a glorious future for our children. And one of such engagements shall be tomorrow. Each state in the Southeast will set up a fund to assist the victims of the crisis, including the police, the army, and other security agencies, as well as our civilians. Four, the state governors are committed to addressing the concerns of our young people that are peculiar to various states, and we engage the federal government and their colleagues in other states to address the other issues that are national. We advise all our youth that while our governors are working hard to meet their demands in Southeast, the destruction of public and private properties and killing of security agents and civilians will never be allowed to continue. We therefore direct all Igbos, both in and outside Nigeria, to go about their businesses and should not participate in any form of unlawful protest and criminality.
Here in Lagos, residents and business owners are still licking their wounds over losses suffered during the post-End SARS protests in Lagos. Some of the victims told Channels Television that it will take more than mere words of assurances from the government to leap again.
Life seemed to have returned to Lagos metropolis, with people carrying on in what can be described as business as usual. Marked under this sense of commercial and human activity are those whose businesses and means of livelihood has been brought to ground zero, those who took a hit from the rampaging arsonists, what many have described as a fallout of the Lekki Toll Plaza incident, which is an unfortunate twist to the End SARS protesters. This wine shop, usually stocked with various brands according to the owner, has been stripped to bare bones, leaving the proprietress despondent.
All these shelves are filled with expensive drinks. They emptied it. They took everything. They even took AC. They removed the AC, both the indoor and the outdoor vents. They carried chillers. There are 4 chillers in this shop. They carried all the chillers with all. They did not even leave a bottle of drink. All these shelves are always filled with drinks. Food drinks in cartons are here. All these are shelves.
Most shops on this high street in Surulere had a taste of the bitter pill of losses and destruction. More devastating is the damage to the popular shopping mall on Adeniran Gunsoya. Eyewitness says the vandalism started by 7 p.m. and went on till early hours of the next day. A total of 150 shops suffered losses of various degree. Where necessary, they shut out the thick glass protection to gain access. They didn't even spare this pharmacy store. They even had some ice cream elsewhere and some food. How more devastating can it be for anyone? Just after 20 days in the business, here at this mall, an investment in excess of 30 million naira, this man tells the story of how everything has gone to ruin.
We are looking at, for the gadgets alone, we're looking at about 7.4 million worth of gadgets, minus the screens and some other peripherals, which will be amounting to about 10 to 10 to 11.1 thereabouts, just for the accessories and gadgets and the whole gaming machines. For the rent, we paid about 6 to 7 million per annum. So that was minus that, you know. So they took everything.
Still, the question begging seriously for answers is, what is the connection between the protests and the wanton destruction and looting of critical public and private property?
As at 4 a.m., they were still in the mall stealing, looting, uninterrupted.
We've lost over 30 million naira in this looting. The first one that happened was during the xenophobic attack. We lost close to 20 million naira then. And this time around, after we lost that money, we approached the government. They asked us to bring a letter. We did everything they asked us to do. Unfortunately, we didn't get anything. We had to go back to bank and we borrowed money from bank. We restocked and we started again. And this one happened.
Members of the Fourth Estate of the Realm, whose constitutionally provided jobs meant they kept everyone abreast with developments of the NSAS and more, took a fall. Broadcast equipment worth millions of dollars touched. The enumeration of destructions across the state is still ongoing. Governor Sanwo-Olu perhaps has one of the most difficult jobs presently.
500 staff that they have, some buildings did survive.
As many business owners and beneficiaries of public utilities are quite expectant of how any form of compensation will pan out. Hopefully, it will be a fruitful wait. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Devastation going on there. When in part two after the break, though, more on the aftermath of the NSAS protest. Plus, we examine the role of the intelligence community in averting such social upheaval. We have the former state director of the DSS, Mr. Mike Ejiofor, to discuss this. Join us again. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. President Buhari urges Nigerians to reflect on the virtues of the Holy Prophet by showing love and understanding for fellow citizens as Muslims worldwide celebrate Eid-el-Maulud. As more states take stock of destruction to government and private property following the NSAS protests, Kogi government laments vandalization and looting of equipment in the Central Medical Store in Lokoja. Adamawa state government recovers over 60 of the 110 tractors looted from its storage facilities, vows to ensure all are returned by the looters. And President Emmanuel Macron says France will not surrender its core values after 3 persons were killed in a knife attack at a church in Nice. The Taraba state government is appealing to residents, especially youth, to refrain from acts capable of tarnishing their image. The state government is also asking youth to support its quest for peace and return to the state. Deputy Governor Haruna Manu made the call at an occasion to swear in additional members of the Judicial Panel of Inquiry on Police Brutality, to include the youth and women.
I urge every one of us to join hands and support the state and federal government in order to achieve this task. The state government, knowing quite well that women and youth are victims of such brutality in the society, and the fact that their input oftentimes can be far-reaching, decides to include youth and women bodies to expand the membership of the Commission to accommodate the representative of these groups.
And in Abia State, 18 persons suspected to be involved in the destructive activities following the NSAS protests have also been arrested. The Commissioner of Police in the state, Janet Agbede, who briefed journalists in Umuahia, the state capital, on their actions and involvement, said that one of the rifles taken by the hoodlums has been recovered, while efforts are on to recover the remaining 2. She said the command is committed to a crime-free state and debunked rumors of an intended attack on the state by herdsmen.
On October 24, 2020, the hoodlums break open a warehouse opposite Golden Guinea in Umahia, where scanty bags of fertilizers and a few bags of rice for replanting, preserved with chemical, were kept and started stealing them. However, following a distress call, a combined team of the police and the military timely arrived and repelled them. As at now, a total number of 18 persons were arrested with one FNC rifle with 12 rounds of live ammunition and other weapons of violence in connection with the killings, looting, and burnings. I wish to reassure the law-abiding citizens and residents in the state to go about their lawful businesses, as the law enforcement agencies are ever ready to protect their lives and properties.
The governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, has signed an executive order prescribing the indigenous people of Biafra in the state, while restating that the state remains home to all tribes. The governor also lifted the ban early imposed in some parts of the state in the wake of the NSAS protests to protect lives and property. Some of the areas include Mile 1, Mile 2, Ilabuchi, Ikoku areas, among others. He, however, says the curfew in Oyigbo local government area remains, while the Ikoku market remains shut. The governor, who made the announcements during a statewide broadcast made the broadcast, in Port Harcourt, the River State capital.
Let it be understood that we have nothing against all or any specific tribe, and will continue to live in peace with people of all other tribal extractions residing or doing business in River State. But we have everything against the presence and activities of the legally proscribed and anarchic indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, and whatever that group stands for in River State. This is clearly a terrorist group whose existence, creed, mission, and activities are strongly denounced even by the government and people of certain eastern states of the country. I have therefore signed the executive order to reinforce the total ban on IPOB and its activities in River State or any part thereof, and nothing will stop us from enforcing this ban in its entirety. I hereby lift the existing curfew on Mile 1, Mile 2, Ilabuchi, Emenike, and Ikoku areas of Port Harcourt, as well as Rubo in Abia local government area of the state. However, the curfew in Oyigbo local government area shall remain in force until further notice.
Let's get more perspective on the violence and looting that followed the NSAS protests, especially regarding what could have been done to prevent it. I've been joined by a former state director of the Department of State Services. I started by asking him whether all that happened could have been avoided.
It was a spontaneous reaction, aggravated grievance from the people, and provocation based on the shooting in Lagos, in Lekki. You also recall that even before then, we have had a series of spontaneous reactions. So it was not as it was planned. But you see, the problem is that there's no way it should have been avoided, because it was not something that I think people planned to do. But the irony, the bad aspect of it is that people who went on rampage. We have been talking about our police, that our police is not good. It's not every policeman that is that. I agree that we have a lot of bad eggs in the police. And that is why when the youth came up to say they want the police reform. Reform is not just in terms of training or welfare of the police, but fishing out the bad eggs. You can see the anger method on the police, and that was what happened. And the police, in turn, went underground And everybody had a field day, which was responsible for what actually happened. But when the IG came up to say, no, we must take back the state, the situation became normal. And I think we have learned our lesson, and we still want to see how we move forward.
But do you think that the intelligence community did play its role well enough in the lead up to the violence?
Of course, you don't need to be an intelligence officer to know that these things were bound to happen. After a lot of issues, when you recall that these youths demonstrated for almost 2 weeks, unchallenged, nobody disturbed them, they were having their field day until the provocation came. So it was actually the provocation of the military that gave rise to this, not the main disturbance from the people.
What would have an equipped police have looked like in a situation like this?
So many things. You see, we have been saying, without sounding like broken record, that the police is ill-equipped, underfunded. But I also believe that with the new trust fund, maybe we get more technology for the police, get training, get welfare for the people, and try to build confidence. This problem the Nigerian police is having is the issue of trust. There needs to be mutual trust. There needs to be confidence building between the police and the people. We don't have two police. We have Nigerian police, policed by Nigerians, and we must accept them. With the reform, I think the leadership of the police should now go inwards, fish out the bad eggs in the police, while carrying out the other reforms of welfare and trade.
Now that this upheaval has abated, what role does the intelligence community play from here on?
Well, a lot of roles. I expect that the state security service will send out the operatives into the hinterlands and various communities, have a lot of information on planned action so that we will not be taken by surprise again. And that role, I feel they have been discarding, and they need to intensify more efforts. All the security agencies, I don't see the need of getting the military involved in all these civil operations. And that was what gave rise to this situation we found ourselves. So I expect the state security service, the police, to intensify their gathering, intelligence gathering efforts to prevent reoccurrence of this kind of situation.
Mr. Mike Ejiofor, thank you again for speaking with us on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
When the News at 10 returns, more stories. Federal government will engage stakeholders in final push for Okonjo-Iweala to lead the World Trade Organization despite opposition from the United States. That's on Business News. Join us again. Welcome back. The president has given ministers a one-week ultimatum to submit reports of their consultations with their constituents in the aftermath of the EndSARS protests, which had been hijacked by rampaging youths, thereby resulting in a state of lawlessness in different parts of the country. Speaking on our program, Sunrise Daily, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, confirmed that President Muhammadu Buhari told the ministers to go and interface with their constituents in a bid to stop the looting and burning of government and private property by hoodlums in the aftermath of the protest against police brutality.
At the end of the Federal Executive Council meeting 9 days ago, the president directed all ministers to return to their states. He said constitutionally, the ministers are the ones that represent their states in the cabinet and in the federal government. So they should return to their respective states, engage with the governors and engage with the people so that there can be a better understanding of what is happening in the country. Yesterday, I can tell you, because there was another Federal Executive Council meeting yesterday, and the president asked for briefs from the ministers who went out. Only 2 had their reports ready as of yesterday because some others were still in their respective states, still carrying out the assignment. So the president said, all of them should turn in their reports through the Secretary to the government of the Federation in the incoming week. Well, it can only be positive. One, it will help us to establish the truth to some things, because there are lots of conjectures, there are lots of colorations, outright falsehood, fake news, and all that. The ministers can come with what is near authentic based on the consultations they are going to make.
At least 17 persons have been killed, several others wounded in separate reprisal attacks by armed bandits in Diskuru village in Dandume and Faskari local government areas of Katsina State. The public relations officer of the Katsina State Police Command, Isa Gambo, told Channel Television that 12 persons were killed in Diskuru village, while 5 members of a vigilante group were killed in Faskari local government area. He confirmed that the Air Force killed many of the bandits who were fleeing the scene of the attack. To education, the current impasse between the federal government and ASUU remains a cause for concern as their industrial action continues. On our program, Politics Today, the ASUU president explained that the position the federal government is taking on the issues of contention makes it hard for negotiations to make progress.
If we have lecturers that are not being paid for 8-9 months, how can we have that person putting in his or her best in the system? If people are going back to the universities and they will be paid half or less of their usual salary, how can we cope with that? And the salary is not the only issue, like I said. There were allowances that were discussed. There was the issue of salary scale. If we have been on the same salary structure for 11 years, I think our members have the right to say, no, that cannot happen. So when we put the 5 issues that I earlier enumerated side by side with what government has done to compound the process, government has made it difficult for smooth negotiation. So at one of our meetings, when we discussed how we are going to approach all other issues, then we came to the issue of outstanding salaries, the issue of allowances, and government said, well, your members will be paid once they agree to go to IPPIS. And we told them, does it make economic sense?
Meanwhile, the federal government is asking tertiary institutions to work towards addressing the unstable academic calendar in the country. The Minister of Education, Mr. Adamu, says the instability of the academic calendar is impacting negatively on government's efforts at providing quality tertiary education. The minister, who was represented at the 15th annual retreat of the Association of Registrars of Nigerian Universities in Abuja, decried what he described as the tension brewing in public universities over the appointment of vice-chancellors.
From across the Federation, registrars of Nigerian universities conferred in Abuja for the 15th annual retreat of the Association of Registrars of Nigerian Universities. The chairman of the association sets the tone for the retreat as he bemoans the challenges facing university education in the country.
There are a lot of challenges facing the administration of universities, particularly these days when we are facing a lot of erosion of autonomy of Nigerian universities by various agencies.
The Executive Secretary of the National Universities Commission, who represented the Minister of Education at the occasion, harps on the need to maintain a stable academic calendar.
We, as I say, are in a very deep crisis in Nigerian universities today. The system is expanding, but the complexity is not the main issue at stake. It is the instability in the system.
In a keynote address, a former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission and former vice-chancellor of Bayero University, Kano, prefers solutions to the challenges confronting university administration.
If the national context is undemocratic and authoritarian, it constrains or obstructs democratization of university administration. On the other hand, even if a country can be said to be under democratic rule, a streak of undemocratic and authoritarian disposition by university administrators would be unwholesome and obstructive of realization of the vision and the mission of a university.
The two-day retreat with the theme, University Administration in Nigeria under Democratic Rule, Issues, Challenges and Way Forward, is aimed at repositioning Nigerian universities ahead of the resumption of academic activities.
The Nigeria Labour Congress is asking the federal and state governments to increase funding for the health sector. According to the NLC president, Mr. Ayuba Waba, the Nigerian government needs to take advantage of the current realities of the COVID-19 pandemic to scale up investments in the health sector. He was addressing journalists at the Labour House in Abuja on the occasion of the year 2020 Global Day of Action on Care. October 29th is set aside by the International Trade Union Confederation to raise awareness of the need to care for the health of workers.
This year's Day of Action on Care is coming at the most auspicious time as the world undergoes a very challenging period occasioned by the sudden outbreak of the deadly coronavirus across the world, otherwise known as COVID-19. COVID-19 has fully exposed several countries, including our country, as having invested not enough in the healthcare institutions and even making it difficult to attain the universal health coverage, which is the priority of countries around the world. The pandemic has put everyone at risk, both the rich and the poor. And therefore, that's why the team investing in healthcare now, or investing in care now, is to draw more support and also demand for heavy investment in healthcare by our government and big businesses if we must keep a healthy society and productive human resource base. Apart from the open fact that our healthcare sector has been neglected for too long, healthcare workers have been subjected to unfair treatment. Let me use this auspicious occasion to once again call on the federal government to pay the 2-month salaries all health workers arising from the industrial dispute in 2018, please. In conclusion, we reiterate our position that government must be ready to invest heavily in healthcare sector, as no country survives without effective healthcare and a healthy people.
And just an update on the aftermath of the EndSARS protests. Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has continued his assessment of scenes of attack by unknown persons with a visit to Television Continental to inspect the level of damage carried out there. The station's main building was set ablaze, leaving broadcast equipment and operational vehicles burnt, while some of them were looted. It was one of the facilities that were damaged in the city last week by youths following the shooting of protesters at the Lekki Toll area on October 20th.
Wednesday, October 21st, is one day the management and staff of Television Continental and Max FM will not forget, as some irate youth invaded the stations, setting them ablaze. Transmission gadgets, studios, production rooms and operational vehicles belonging to members of staff all went up in flames.
Unfortunately, under such sad circumstances.
This prompted the Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, to visit the stations where the TVC's Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Andrew Hanlon, and top management staff received the Governor and his entourage. After that, he takes the Governor around the station, showing him all the affected areas. At the end of it all, he describes the incident as traumatizing for all members of the staff of the station, but says management is hopeful that they will bounce back before long.
Hopefully, Anne has more cheery news and business news.
Thank you, Marachi. Well, it's more of a hopeful story as the federal government says that Nigeria will continue to engage relevant stakeholders to ensure the emergence of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as the next Director General of the World Trade Organization. In a statement released today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the third and final round of the selection process for the WTO's next leader was concluded on Tuesday this week, and the result was formally announced a day after. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who has secured the majority support of WTO member countries, is yet to be formally declared and returned the winner, as all 164 member states of the Intergovernmental Trade Body are all expected to adopt the new leader by consensus in accordance with its rule of procedures. Her ambition hit a setback on Wednesday after the United States opposed her emergence as the most preferred candidates for the WTO top job over South Korean rival Yoo Myung-hee. Meanwhile, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala says that she remains positive of becoming the first African and female Director General of the WTO despite the hiccups. In a tweet today, the former World Bank director explains that she feels humbled to have been declared as the candidate with the largest vote amongst 164 member states of the 25-year-old Global Trade Organization. The tweet reads, "Happy for the success and continued progress of our WTO DG bid. Very humbled to be declared the candidate with the largest, broadest support among members and most likely to attract consensus. We move on to the next step on November 9. Despite hiccups, we are keeping the positivity going." And still on the WTO leadership, the Senior Special Advisor on Industrialization to the President of the African Development Bank, Mr. Oyebanji Ilaron Oyeyinka, has identified factors that have led to the challenge in the final selection process for the WTO next leader. This follows the opposition of the United States to the emergence of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala as the most preferred candidate for the World Trade Organization's top job on Wednesday. On our breakfast program, Sunrise Daily, he said that a similar scenario played out during the AfDB's election, which eventually led to the re-election of Dr. Akinwumi Adesina for a second 5-year term.
I think there are broadly two things that you could identify. One is the Americans' own internal politics. America has withdrawn mostly from multilateralism. The America First agenda of the current administration actually, of course, is in contradistinction to the multilateral world that we have had since 1945. So that plays a big role in this. I mean, one may not know exactly what another administration will have done, but you can almost guess that this might not be as difficult as we are having now. The second, of course, big issue is China. We know that China is ascending the global scale, is now the second most wealthy country to the United States. The Americans have not hidden their own competitive nature to the rise of China. And of course, the increasingly dominant presence of China in Africa has been a problem for not just America, but even some Europeans also.
Nigeria's stock market has closed today in observance of the Muslim holiday, but its major counterparts in other regions around the world were in session today. Let's take a look at the closing performance for Thursday. And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. It's back to you, Amarachi.
Thanks, Anne. France's President Emmanuel Macron says his country will not be surrendering its core values after visiting scene of a knife attack in the city of Nice, which left 3 people dead. The attack happened at the Notre Dame Basilica, with one of the victims said to have been virtually beheaded. French media say investigations have begun into the attacker, a 21-year-old Tunisian migrant, but authorities have not provided any details. Simon Pusey has more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. 3 people have died in a knife attack at a church in Nice in what the French President Emmanuel Macron has said was an Islamist terrorist attack. He said France would not surrender its core values after visiting the Notre Dame Basilica in the southern city. Thousands of troops are being deployed to protect churches and schools. In Nice, one elderly victim was virtually beheaded, according to officials. Another woman and a man also died. A male suspect was shot and detained. Anti-terror prosecutors have opened an investigation into the attack, and France has raised its national security alert to its highest level. 2 of Europe's biggest economies are reinstating some form of national lockdown as the continent confronts a surge in coronavirus cases and deaths. From Friday, people in France will only be allowed to leave home for essential work or medical reasons. President Emmanuel Macron said the country risked being overwhelmed by a second wave that no doubt will be harder than the first. Germany, meanwhile, is imposing a less severe national lockdown. The measures coming into force on Monday are not as far-reaching as in France, but they include the closure of restaurants, bars, gyms and theatres. US presidential nominee Joe Biden and his wife Jill have cast their ballots for the 2020 election. They join more than 74 million Americans who have voted, with 6 days remaining in the contest. The Democratic candidate spent the day taking briefings on the COVID-19 pandemic before delivering a speech in Delaware, a state he is expected to easily win. Trump, who has been holding more campaign events in battleground states amid rising coronavirus cases, voted for himself on Saturday at a public library in Florida. He changed his residency from New York a year ago. A curfew has come into force in Philadelphia after 2 days of protests and looting following the police killing of a black man. The family of Walter Wallace Jr. says he was suffering a mental health crisis when he was shot by officers. Police say he had refused to drop a knife. On Tuesday night, protesters again clashed with police and barricaded businesses across the city were looted. The curfew order is citywide and began at 2100 hours local time. The Pennsylvania National Guard, as well as police reinforcements, have been deployed. Authorities say 30 officers were hurt during Monday night's clashes. Al-Qaeda is still heavily embedded within the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's in spite of a historic US-Taliban agreement earlier this year, according to a senior United Nations official. Earlier this year, the US signed an agreement with the Taliban committing to withdrawing all American forces from the country by next summer if the Taliban ensured groups including Al-Qaeda were not able to use Afghan territory to plot international attacks. Hong Kong teen activist Tony Chung has been charged under a new national security law just days after he was detained outside the US consulate. The 19-year-old had reportedly planned to enter the consulate and claim asylum. He faces life imprisonment if found guilty of secession, conspiracy to publish seditious content, and money laundering. Mr. Chung is the second person to be charged under the law and was denied bail by the court. It comes days after hundreds of people rallied in Taiwan's capital to call for China to release 12 Hong Kongers arrested by mainland authorities as part of a global campaign to support the pro-democracy movement in the financial hub. Record numbers of an endangered species of turtle have hatched on a beach in northern Mexico, believed to be the result of reduced human activity during the coronavirus pandemic. The indigenous Seri community in Sonora State said it had released more than 2,250 baby olive Ridley sea turtles into the Gulf of California. The community usually releases around 500 of the small creatures every year. Fishing and tourism limits mean their beach nests have not been as disturbed. The olive Ridley sea turtle, which is under threat globally, lays its eggs on the beaches of a number of Mexican states between May and September. And finally, Australians scientists say they have discovered a detached coral reef that is taller than the Eiffel Tower. The blade-like reef is nearly 500 metres tall and 1.5 kilometres wide, rising to its shallowest depth of 40 metres below the ocean's surface. It is about 6 kilometres away from the edge of the Great Barrier Reef. A team of scientists from James Cook University were mapping the northern seafloor when they found the reef. It's thought to be the first detached reef of that size to be discovered in over 120 years.
So we know that the base of it is around 1.5 kilometres long. It's nearly exactly 500 metres tall, so it's far higher than Sydney Tower or the Eiffel Tower, even the Empire State Building. They look quite tiny next to it. It comes up to quite a point. It's very blade-like in plan view. The top of it, the shallowest part of it, is about 300 metres wide and about 50 metres across.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thanks, Simon. Sports News is next. Here's Olumide, my colleague.
Thank you, Amarachi. Hello and welcome to Sports News. We begin with football. Super Eagles head coach Gennard Rohr has called 23 players for next month's Africa Cup of Nations qualifying doubleheader against Sierra Leone. Nigeria's leading marksman Victor Osimhen returns after missing out of this month's friendlies against Algeria and Tunisia, just as Joseph Aribo, Ogene Karu Etebo and Daniel Okpeyi as well. The three-time African champions take on the Sierra Leonean team at the Samuel Ogbamudia Stadium, Benin City, on November the 13th, before visiting Freetown for the return game on November the 17th. The players are expected to report to Benin City on November the 9th. The Confederation of African Football have postponed the Champions League semi-final return match between Zamalek of Egypt and Raja Casablanca, Morocco, from November 1st to a date yet to be decided. About 15 players from Casablanca have tested positive for COVID-19, leaving only 10 fit players. Zamalek led 1-0 from the first leg in Casablanca, with Moroccan Ashraf Bensharki scoring the only goal midway through the first half. CAF also announced that the final between the teams, scheduled for an Egyptian venue on November the 6th, has been postponed indefinitely. The verdict in the trial of former FIFA Secretary General Jerome Valcke and PSG Chairman Nasser El-Khelaifi is to be delivered by the Swiss Federal Criminal Court on Friday. Valcke has been charged with accepting bribes, multiple counts of aggravated criminal mismanagement, and falsification of documents in connection with the awarding of media rights for various FIFA World Cups and Confederation Cups. Al-Khelaifi, a member of the UEFA Executive Committee, has been charged with inciting Valcke to commit aggravated criminal mismanagement. Prosecutors have requested a 36-month prison sentence for Valcke and a 28-month term for Al-Khelaifi. Burnley are on the verge of being taken over in a deal worth around $258 million by Egyptian businessman Mohammed El-Kashashi. The takeover is being led by El-Kashashi, who is based in Dubai and made his name in the food and leisure industry, and also involves sports lawyer Chris Furnell. Reports say discussions over the deal has been going on for the past 12 months, but that contracts have now been signed and exchanged, while proof of funds have also been established. All parties are now waiting for the Premier League to rubber stamp the deal. Away from football, England's Rugby Football Union has announced a $13.9 million annual loss as a result of the pandemic. Cancellation of the Barbarians fixture was estimated to have cost the Rugby Football Union a loss of $1.3 million at a time when the governing body had already implemented salary reductions and made 140 people redundant. That's it on Sports News. I'm Rachi, back to you.
Thanks, Olumide. And the main news again. President Muhammadu Buhari today urged Nigerians to reflect on the virtues of the Holy Prophet Muhammad by showing love and understanding for fellow citizens as Muslims worldwide celebrate the Eid-el-Maulud. Also today, the Kogi state government lamented the vandalization and looting of equipment in the state's central medical store in Lokoja as officials took stock of the destruction to government and private property following the EndSARS protests. And President Emmanuel Macron today said France will not surrender its core values after 3 persons were killed in a knife attack at a church in Nice. That is the news at 10 tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night and stay safe.